Greetings, everyone. Welcome into the latest edition of the Wolverine podcast. Anthony Broom here with Chris Ballas and Clayton Safey, and it is one of the best weeks of the year. It's feast week in college hoops. It is rivalry week in college football, and that means the best rivalry in college football, best rivalry in arguably all of sports, plays itself out this weekend. Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan enters Saturday's game at 6-5 and a 20.5-point underdog. But I think vibes, optimism around the program certainly kind of carrying us into this week against a team that, let's face it, Michigan's had their number the last 3 years or so. So we'll get into all of that. Fellas, welcome back in. How we feeling on a Monday?
Feeling great. Michigan seems confident, and you never know in a rivalry game. You just don't. So, but seeing them put up a 50 burger on anybody and the offense doing things that we didn't think they were capable of, the adjustments they made in the running game to get that going, at least gives you a sliver of hope. I don't think they're going to win this football game on Saturday, but it's not like I wrote the death march that it used to be when we were going down there and watching Rich Rodriguez teams or Brady Hoke teams. I think there's at least a shot. And I think this defensive line gives them a chance to hang around a little bit. So I would love to see Davis Warren get a win down there, guys. That would be unbelievable to me. And to see those people file out like the funeral march Clay last time was just fantastic.
Yeah, it's the best week of the year. It's the greatest rivalry in sports, and there's no debating it. And you add in the college hoops, as you mentioned, feast week. It's incredible. Thanksgiving helps you pass the time. It goes so slow because you're just waiting for kickoff. I can't wait till we get down to Columbus, and usually I say beautiful wherever we're going, but it's not beautiful. Business trip, get in and out, and obviously Michigan hoping they can go down and continue to dominate this series because that's what they've done against Ohio State to the point that Ryan Day's on the hot seat. In a certain respect, they're the betting favorite right now to win the national championship. And if he loses this game, I don't know that he survives another week. They could certainly still get in the college football playoff, but if they don't and they lose to Michigan, I think he's done. So that's just a crazy spot to be in. The betting favorite to be the national champion, yet if you lose this weekend, you may not have a job.
I will say this: if he does lose this game and still wins the Natty, then I think they keep him. But you better win the Natty if you lose to Michigan again.
Yeah, I mean, they could win this game, lose this game. I mean, to me, they're in regardless because the rest of college football, hey, shocking. We expanded the playoff, and there are still only maybe 3 or 4 teams that I think have a chance to win it all. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But, hey, we have made some very sad and dejected walks out of that stadium. We made maybe some of us, most of us here, 2/3 of us here. The 3 of us made a very it was a triumphant, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it, the last time we were there. So we'll see. We'll get into that game. We'll get into some of the other stuff that's happened. And that's the key word with all of it, Chris, I think, is that the last week or so, if nothing else, has given you hope instead of it feeling like, you're going down there and all dressed in all black and just waiting for the season to get over. There's a lot of intrigue around this week and a lot of intrigue around stuff that's been going on with Michigan football. We want to remind you, as we start the show, you can join the Wolverine for $1 for your first 7 days of access to our site. A lot of great stuff on the recruiting front, transfer portal stuff coming up. You've got, we'll see what happens with the coaching stuff. All of those types of things are in play here. $1 for your first 7 days. And then you're at $4.99 a month after that, which is, again, just a tremendous deal, tremendous value for Michigan fans looking to get the inside scoop on what's going on with all things Michigan Wolverines. We are also brought to you today by our friends at HomeField. And it's not Black Friday yet, but Black Friday is back at HomeField. They've launched their Black Friday sale through December 3rd. It's their most ambitious sale to date, 30% off site-wide, like everything that's there, whether it's Michigan stuff, whether it's coaches jackets, whether it's the bomber jackets, whether it's the joggers, whatever's there, 30% off site wide using the promo code BFCM24. You've heard us talk about HomeField glowingly for years at this point, and I'm on vacation right now, but not vacation. It's a work trip, some work, some fun. But half of my suitcase, I packed as HomeField stuff because it is breathable. It is the most comfortable stuff that I have in my wardrobe, and it packs really well too. So for you guys looking to travel during the holidays, you're going to go see your families this week, going to go see your families, over Christmas, all those types of things. Use that promo code BFCM24 and restock on your Michigan wardrobe today. So thank you again to HomeField for sponsoring our podcast. All right, let's move into the meat and potatoes of this week's episode, in that, a 50-6 win over Northwestern, tremendous. I think sort of emblematic, though, of the week that was for Michigan, where it was one of many things that kind of came out of nowhere for this program. It gives you hope, not only in the short term, in the long term. I don't, even though there was optimism, I don't know that it was expected that Bryce Underwood was going to flip to Michigan. Even though there was optimism that Michigan's NIL was going to get better, I don't know that people expected that, the fourth richest man in the world, Larry Ellison, and his wife Jolyn would be involved in that. People didn't expect feeling hope going into Ohio State week. So I think that's the overarching feeling for me as we start this rivalry week, is that we talked about it a little bit there in the opening of the segment, but you do have hope to hang your hat on. And listen, all the pressure's on Ohio State this week, but I feel like no matter what happens, Michigan has now kind of positioned itself to be the team of the offseason, which, we made fun of Ohio State for winning their so-called offseason championship this year, but it just feels like finally, in a year that's gone sideways in a lot of ways, the train is somewhat back on the rails, and in the long term, maybe very much back on the rails.
Let's be honest, you have to win some off seasons to put yourself in position to be a player in the playoff. That's just the way it is. And the fact that Ohio State was doing everything it could and spending so much money and then kept coming up short 3 years in a row against Michigan is what we were making fun of, right? They couldn't beat their rival, let alone win a national championship. And then Michigan doing it the right way, despite what anybody else might think, the right way, comes in and wins their national championship, which was beautiful. So lots of fun, but this is really a product of a few things. Obviously, we talked about Larry Ellison, but LSU's complete implosion didn't hurt the last couple of weeks. The loss to Florida, and they completely turned on Brian Kelly, and a lot of people close to Bryce Underwood are probably telling him at this point, what are you doing? Now you've got an opportunity here, and it goes beyond just the money too. Michigan's going to bring in some coaches, I think, that are going to help him out and make this offense really dynamic with him. And I think that was probably a stipulation, if we're being honest, because he's going to want to throw the ball. They're still going to want to run the ball, but he can do that too. He can be a great dual threat, and it's just amazing where we were, just several weeks ago to now. It's just a completely different feeling, and you felt it on the sidelines too, guys. I thought, and not just because of Bryce Underwood, but there was something different in that building on Saturday where there was more confidence. There was generally more excitement among the guys, and I think that's carried over this week. And listening to Sharon Moore's press conference today, that they think they've got an opportunity here. So that's exciting. That excites you when you've got a bunch of guys that really want to play in this game, and all they've known is to beat Ohio State. If we get to that late in that third quarter again on Saturday, guys, and this is a ball game in 27-degree weather, when you've got those soft Buckeyes huddled around a little charcoal fire or something like that, that would be fantastic. That's my hope. I want to see it. I want to see the look on Ryan Day's face that we've seen for the last 3 years of sheer and utter panic, and that would make this season, end it with a completely different feeling.
Yeah, I thought this would happen. I said on the podcast, I thought that Bryce Underwood would flip to Michigan. But then when you see the Schefter notification come through, you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is happening. It's happening right now. And will he visit on Saturday? Yeah, I think he will. I think he's going to visit as a Michigan commit. So it was kind of surreal that it came together that quickly at the end of the week there. And then he's tailgating with Connor Stallions on Saturday before the game, and you see him on the sideline with a whole bunch of recruits down there. Michigan hosting a bunch of blue chip recruits over the weekend. They got a ton of momentum, but it's big because Bryce Underwood's a great player. I saw him when he was an 8th grader at a camp. I saw him when he was a freshman in high school in game. I saw him just a few weeks ago in game as well. I mean, he's as advertised as a number one overall recruit in a class. And those guys, I mean, you think of the players who have been that: Adrian Peterson, Jadeveon Clowney, all sorts of guys. Rashawn Gary was the last one for Michigan, and he didn't have maybe the sacks that people wanted, but he still had a heck of a 3 years. But this is the quarterback position. That's what makes it bigger than Rashawn Gary or even most of these other guys. He's that good. The second thing is he's going to attract a lot of other talent around him, different recruits that you're seeing. I want to play with him. I think we'll see it out of the transfer portal as well. Guys will understand that, with a couple years of eligibility left, that you get a chance to play with a really good quarterback like this. And if you're watching on YouTube, first, like the video, but second of all, just check out Connor Stallions with Bryce Underwood there, courtesy of Isaiah Hull of Wolverines Wire. Great photo. And then the third thing is Michigan's open for business from an NIL standpoint. And I think that they are now, in the market for some of these players that they weren't in the market for weeks ago, months ago, certainly. And, obviously years ago with the way they've recruited over the last few years. So it's just huge in all three regards. And now we'll see what comes of it over, the next month plus with how Michigan's going to build its roster for next season.
A lot of work to do. And you'll see people online, you'll see people in, local radio, not so local radio say, oh yeah, well, it looks like desperation. You got to do more than just land the big fish. And my response to that would be, duh. There's a lot of work that needs to be done still. And we know that there are upgrades that need to be made on the coaching staff, clear upgrades on the roster. I think from his perspective, certainly up front on the offensive line, certainly in terms of finding more playmakers on offense that aren't running backs, even though that's what I think at its core Michigan still wants to be. I don't think they're going to go to an air raid under Bryce Underwood by any means, but need to add some talent everywhere on offense. So there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done there. We're already seeing kind of like the early dividends of that in terms of, you follow some of EJ Holland's reporting and he does a tremendous job for us. Just some of the 5-star guys that they're kind of back in on, with 12 days to signing day. Maybe some of those recruitments go past signing day, but him and I talked about it, and we have talked about it, off platform, in that when you land this type of recruit, and Clayton, I think you and I were talking about this on Saturday, like once he gets on campus, once he enrolls, and by the way, with Michigan being bowl eligible, he will be able to participate in bowl practices, which is a great first step for him and some of the other early enrollees. But when you have a guy like that, and I know the money, what's the number, what isn't the number, he's getting paid a lot of money. But the second he steps on campus, that doesn't matter. He's going to be a guy that's going to have to, earn his keep. And certainly, the cachet he brings is going to give him a leg up in a lot of areas. But, it is that gravitational pull. It is that kind of, all boats sailing the same direction in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of NIL. So this was a pretty stern wake-up call for, I'm not going to sit here and say Michigan's the next Alabama or Georgia, but Michigan is for real on the NIL front now. And by all indications, they are going to show no signs of slowing down anytime soon.
And that's the fun part about this, right? We've been waiting for years. You've been wondering, boy, what would it feel like to? And it would have felt dirty to me to pay for, when it's illegal. We know what's going on at Alabama. We know what was going on at Georgia, and different schools. If you get hot all of a sudden on the recruiting trail when you haven't been a player before, let's be real. If you weren't a destination, then something's going on, and we knew what and where, but at the same time, when you're seeing teams collect all this talent, you're thinking, man, could you even imagine? And Michigan was always kind of a half tier below, right? Even with some of their best teams, with the exception of last year when it all came together, right? Where guys that were called 3 stars or 4 stars were actually 5-star players that were discovered and developed by Jim Harbaugh and his staff. So that was a team of 5-star guys. And we got to see what a really elite football team looked like. 15-0 speaks for itself. But now you're getting these kids, and the goal is to be able to mesh them in such a way that you are an Alabama or a Georgia, not a Texas A&M, right? Where you're getting all this talent and guys aren't getting along because some guys are getting paid more than others, and that is the challenge, and that'll be the goal here for these guys going forward. But you need talent to win, flat out. And in this day and age, Michigan, how many guys the last 2 or 3 years that they should have gotten that they didn't get because their NIL wasn't good enough because Michigan wasn't prepared for that day. Well, it's nice to I hate to call it lucky, but it certainly feels that way, guys, when you get a booster like this to come out of nowhere, and he happens to be the third richest man in the world. And speaking to somebody close to one of the collectives, they said it's like a gift from the football gods, which immediately made me think of Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. But on the recruiting side, what an absolute gift. So I'm happy for Sharon Moore because he had the deck stacked against him, especially losing a lot of his staff, or Jim Harbaugh's staff having to rebuild, and they took a lot of talent away. 18 or so players now in the pros from last year's team, and so I'm happy for him. You could kind of see it on his face, the relief and the joy. And so going forward, he's going to have a lot to work with, fellas.
I think meshing the culture, kind of carrying over what the culture's been, in continuing that with some of the talent you're going to bring in, it'd be huge to keep some guys around that were honored on senior day that have extra eligibility left, like a Max Bredesen. One, not even just for the culture, just because the way he blocks is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it at a position like that. He's kind of carved out his own role at Michigan, and you would love to see that next season. But there are others like Derek Moore and Rayshawn Benny, obviously Moore being a junior, but
Rod Moore.
Yeah, Rod Moore as well. Derek Moore being a junior, but he could come back. He could go to the NFL. He could also come back. So you have, if you're able to blend that, which is how Michigan won the national championship last season, was with a great culture and great talent and guys that were bought into a common mission, then I think you really have something here. So it's easier said than done, because if it was easy, I think a lot of teams would have been able to pull off what Michigan did with more talent, but they couldn't. It was really special. So Sharon Moore still has a ton to prove in so many different areas, but right now they're winning one of the key areas, which is recruiting and NIL, and we'll see, how much it continues, but that's a heck of a start, and certainly some more moves to come.
Two things. One thing I want to add to Clayton's comment about never seen anything like it before. Two guys, Clay, Chris Floyd in 1997, Kevin Dudley under Lloyd Carr in the early 2000s, I believe it was, are two guys that were on that plane. Those are the three guys at that position where you're like, this guy is special. Max Bredesen is definitely in that category.
To be one of three guys in decades, 4 decades, it's like
special.
It's unbelievable. Like I think it was Kalel's second touchdown of the game against Northwestern from the one. It's like Max Bredesen is just having so much fun just planting guys into the ground and then just celebrating. Him and Kalel on some of these goal line touchdowns have just been such a dynamic duo this season.
Short of maybe long snapper, I think the role that he plays is maybe the most undervalued, underrated position in all of football, especially when you're a team that likes to do what Michigan does. I think just final comment maybe on like the recruiting side of things. There's all this talk about, what are these types of recruitments going to do for the culture? And what does it mean for the culture? And, it comes, when you see whatever the numbers are, when you see those numbers get out of not just, Bryce Underwood, but we've seen some of these other, big NIL deals since it became a thing, 3 or 4 years ago. The stigma is that these guys that get paid that amount of money are just chasing a bag, right? And it's just they don't care about school, they don't care about team, and that's some of the higher profile ones. Like, you're gonna have a spotlight on you for this one, coming off of this season and coming off of what a lot of people are saying that Bryce Underwood could get paid at Michigan. But I'll just push back on the stigma that it is all about money. I think if it was just about the money, this might have been something that was done months ago, if this was being mobilized behind the scene. I did think, it took a lot of buy-in. And I'm not going to insult your intelligence as a watcher or a listener and saying that money wasn't a factor at all. But I think the stigma with some of these kids is that they're coming in and, if they command a big NIL deal relative to what their peers at similar positions are making at other schools, that it means they're a me guy, or they're not a team first guy. I think finding a way to strike that balance between finding guys who, are worthy of what the market would say they should make, and also are kind of these guys that, they want to play football. They want to get better. They want to be part of a team. They want to get to the NFL. It's going to be interesting for me to see how that meshes with all this at Michigan. You saw a kid, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's Jakeem Stewart, who Michigan's kind of jumped back into the mix in, a 5-star edge guy or a defensive lineman who, he flat out told, I believe it was Steve Wiltfong, like, hey, Michigan straight up told me like they're interested in me, but they couldn't compete with what other teams were offering on an NIL front. So they kind of backed off, and now Michigan's picked up that pursuit again with this money in the coffers now. So we'll see how that all matches up and how it works out in time. But it's what we said day one when Sherrone Moore was hired. Like, he's not Jim Harbaugh. He's never pretended to be Jim Harbaugh, and doesn't, you don't have that Midas touch in finding ways to make guys better on the margins or seeing things that other guys don't necessarily see. So it had to mean improved NIL. It had to mean bringing in these more talented players just out of high school, because it doesn't guarantee anything. They're lotto tickets just with a higher probability of paying out, just in terms of the, what you bring in the aggregate. So
I want to add something here real quick. It's about the kid too, right? If you look at, for example, JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum were making a ton of money here, and probably a lot more money than their teammates. What did they do? When we went down to that camp in Illinois, JJ McCarthy was paying his teammates to be there with him, right? And they loved him for it. He wasn't sitting there and showing off and look at me and I make more money than everybody else. He was sharing with his teammates, and he was beloved by his teammates for that. Same with Blake Corum. You couldn't ask for a better guy. And I'll go back to the Gary Moeller years when Gary was bringing in an insane amount of talent, but these guys did not mesh. Doug Skeen told me, my podcast partner, he goes, we would go in there and Gary Moeller would ask us, Bo would always ask them when Doug Skeen got there initially, what did you think of this guy when you hosted him on his visit? And then he would listen to them and they'd say, hey, great fit here. You know what? He's going to be, if he's a good enough player, he's a great fit. They brought in the #1 offensive tackle, and this guy was a complete asshole in Doug Skeen's words. And Bo said, when he asked them, they said, didn't say anything. They kind of looked at Bo, and Bo said, that's it. He's not coming to Michigan. So he kind of relied on these guys. And Gary Moeller kind of went away from that. And even though Skeen and those guys were saying, hey, this guy's not a good fit, they were taking him anyway, and they never lived up to expectations, even with elite talent. Trevor Price is a guy that comes to mind who was an end, who had a great career after he left Michigan, went to Clemson, and then went to the NFL and had a long career, but just wasn't a great fit here. So it's still a matter of finding those right 5 stars too that are going to buy into that culture. That's the challenge that Sherrone Moore has. But again, it's not about just going out and plucking the best guys. It's plucking the best guys that fit your program.
Right.
Anybody? Bueller?
I thought maybe someone else would weigh in there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see how it all turns out. You'd rather get them in the room and get good guys in there, and they start to police themselves too. You think about those teams coming off the COVID, the team coming off the COVID year. That was a group full of guys that kind of willed that season into existence with some pretty great resources around them. So, yep, should be fun times ahead. But there's a game to play this week. This season is not over. The most important game, regardless of what your record was, or what you were in years past, Michigan plays Ohio State this week. And, Ohio State, the way they're celebrating coming off the win over Indiana, you'd think that they just beat Michigan with some of the trolling on the scoreboard and having a player slide down at the 1-yard line, and then you QB sneak for a touchdown late, which, hey, listen, I'm not going to defend Kurt Cignetti on that front. When you twist the knife against all these other teams, someone's going to twist it right back when they have the opportunity to. So I'm strictly speaking about the way Ohio State is kind of buzzing coming off that win, and they're not overlooking Michigan. I'll never argue that, but there's an opportunity here. I think, the initial point spread that came out was 23.5 points in favor of the Buckeyes. It's down to 20.5. I suspect it'll keep going down a little bit, but they should be favored. They're one of the best teams in college football. They are a group that brought a lot of guys back from teams that have won a lot of football games, similarly to how guys came back to Michigan last year, citing unfinished business, and they're foaming at the mouths for this one. But I'll tell you what, I mean, when you go out and you put a 50 burger on anyone, and I know my post-game show co-host Ryan Van Bergen, once Northwestern relegated to the MAC. I'm not going that far, but not a very good football team. But this team had scored 63 points total since the Washington game, and they put a 50 burger on someone out of note from the clouds. None of us saw that coming. It wasn't expected. It was a bolt of lightning that kind of matched what the surge in the program was last week, and as a result, as you guys are in the building on Monday, a lot of confident guys in that building right now in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and it felt good. It felt like Michigan football again, where you're pounding a team and everybody's getting along well, and you could see everybody celebrating together. And there was just that bounce in their step that had been missing, and it was palpable in that stadium. It was nice to see Tyler Morris starting to do some things again, guys. This guy should be better than he is. People can say Michigan doesn't have any receivers. I think Tyler Morris is a good number 3 guy on a really, really good football team, which is really good at Michigan, being the number 3 guy. He's number 1 right now, but he can be he's better than he's shown, and that was great to see. So Davis Warren had the bad pick, and everybody's like coming out, oh my God, it's just he's terrible, so on and so forth. He hasn't had a pick in a long time. He bounced back and he had a really nice game. The 2-minute drill was fantastic. He made some plays there. And he's not perfect. He's not a great quarterback. He's not going to go down as one of the best in Michigan history, but he is serviceable when everybody else around him is playing well, kind of like Cade McNamara, right? But he's got a better arm. He can make more throws than Cade McNamara is, and he's faster than Cade McNamara is. So he can do it. But to me, it was refreshing to feel again like, okay, we finally, literally, guys, this is the first time I've left a Michigan game this year feeling fulfilled that they got the most out of their talent and that this is how it should be and how it should look if everything's working right, from coaching to guys making plays to the offensive line turning it on in the second half and making their blocks and opening lanes for Kalel Mullings. So it was fun, and they did it without Will Johnson, and they did it without Colston Loveland in the second half, and that was encouraging. So no, we're not predicting they're going to go down there and beat Ohio State, but I think this injects something into their veins here where they think, look, we know what it's like to beat the Buckeyes. We have an opportunity here to kind of salvage the season, and 7-5 is never going to be good enough, guys. But if you beat Ohio State this year and go 7-5, beat Ohio State, Michigan State in your first year as Sharon Moore, I think this fan base would be okay with that going into the offseason. Again, not predicting it, but at least you've got that opportunity, and it doesn't seem like a complete and total pipe dream now.
Yeah, and they did what they did against Northwestern without Will Johnson, without Colston Loveland, and with Jair Hill wearing number 35.
Yeah, and barely playing.
Yeah, and barely playing. And Amir Hall stepping up and getting an interception that was pretty impressive early in the game. So guys have stepped up. Guys have improved, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You saw some life from the offense. They were able to run block in the second half, 187 yards in the final 2 quarters. Tavi Dunlap scores. Donovan Edwards scores. Kalel Mullings gets in the end zone 3 times. Good vibes there. Offensive line only allowed 3 pressures. They opened some holes. Max Bredesen was a beast. So all good and all good things you want going into the Ohio State game. The defense hasn't allowed a touchdown since the Oregon game. The defense has allowed only just over 500 yards in its last 10 quarters of play. So they're certainly ascending. At the same time, I do wonder how relevant it all is going into Ohio State. It's kind of a completely different ball game, and does it translate playing like that against a team like Northwestern? Does that translate to playing on the road in a hostile environment against one of the best teams in the country? You're going to have to do a lot. You're going to have to do a lot of what you did against Northwestern, but you're going to have to do much more than that as well. Make some more plays. One thing I liked was, okay, we haven't been running the football very well. How can we make the quick passing game an extension of the run game, especially on first down, to get positive yardage? And Michigan did that. 10 first down passes, a lot of them just those quick passes out to Tyler Morris, who benefited from those and didn't do a ton after the catch, but got a little bit of yardage. They still don't have any dynamic playmakers out there other than Loveland, when he's lined up out wide. But I thought they were a little less predictable there. They mixed up, tendency a little bit, throwing to Max Bredesen a couple times. Like, there was a lot to like in terms of just Michigan putting things together. And you said it, Chris. I wrote this in Monday Morning Quarterback. It was the first win of the season where you didn't come out of it kind of with mixed feelings. The Fresno State game, it was like, all right, well, this offense has a lot of work to do. The Arkansas State game, you benched your quarterback in it. The USC game, you're like, you can't start Orji again, right? The Minnesota game, they come storming back, in that one as well. The Michigan State game, you were kind of like, all right, I mean, that's a bad team. You survived. You felt good to keep Paul Bunyan, but what really is this Michigan team? Are they going to be able to win any more games the rest of the way? And then they do that. So clearly, kudos to them, and you feel good for a lot of the seniors, but bigger challenge ahead for sure.
For them, I think the biggest thing is, we've heard so many cliches this year about taking things from State Street to Main Street. We've heard about, how they were getting healthy, the first bye week. And then it was this past week, it was the bye week being called buy-in week. And that was kind of everybody in the building, whatever their job was, whether it was practicing, whether it was focusing on their recovery, for coaches, whether it was game planning, self-scouting, everyone just kind of rededicating and buying in. And, the first half of the North, we get fixated on the 50-6 that we see in the first half of that Northwestern game. It was ugly for a bit. Nice 2-minute drill to end the half. And then you just kind of surge from there. To me, I think the biggest thing, and it kind of ties in with everything that we've talked about to this point, is that you wanted, coming off of what was a bad, I know Indiana was in the top 10 at the time. That was a bad loss at Indiana. The game against Oregon, there were some missed opportunities. They've left a few on the table this year against Washington, against Illinois. And at any point this season, if we had seen guys kind of hanging their heads and not playing hard, I don't know that the game was like, given how the games had gone, I don't know that would have surprised me to see coming off a second bye week. But to see them kind of top to bottom play with their hair on fire, the offense much better in the second half, the defense great again for 4 quarters. That's what gives me hope for hopefully having more talented teams in the future. And also for next Saturday, is that the buy-in is still there. These guys are still playing extremely hard, and we know that they're much more capable than they've shown for, the first 10 games of this season. If they could find a way to bring the effort that they brought, for most of that game Saturday, and certainly on offense, in the second half of that game, they're going to give themselves a puncher's chance in this game against Ohio State. But for them, it's going to be critical. Like, they can't just wait for rallying the troops at halftime and having that come to Jesus moment. Like, that energy has to be on display from the jump in this game. Because I think if you have any chance of putting a scare into them at all, I think you have to take an early lead in Columbus.
You got to get off to a good start. You beat me to it, Anthony. You're absolutely right. And we're on the same page here. They can't fall behind 10-0 and get into a snake pit there and ask Davis Warren to bring them back. And, if the running, rely on the running game. So, boy, that's a pretty picture there. You get Ryan Day standing in the smoke there looking. That guy cracks me up. Regardless, it's you're right. And, it's going to be 27 degrees out there, guys, on Friday. I love it. That could be the latest excuse. I was thinking about this the other day. Well, if it wasn't so dang cold, we would have beaten them guys, or something. If it was snow flurries and then it was the flu. And then last year they had no excuses. They had none. And they're still making excuses. So, but to go down there and beat them with this team, with Davis Warren at quarterback, would be the biggest upset that I've ever seen in this series, and I'm getting up there in age, but to me would just be just unbelievable. So it's fun to think about. Is it going to happen? Probably not. At the same time, I like Michigan's defensive line to do some things in this game, and we're starting to see them play at a really, really high level again, and the guys behind them playing better too, all coming together. If this defense can keep them around, it's not like Ohio State moved the ball up and down the field on Indiana. They had some plays. They had 316 yards, and part of it, of course, was because Indiana was giving them short fields. But this is not a juggernaut offense against good defensive football teams, in my opinion. So if Michigan can put that game together, if Will Johnson could somehow come out and play, that's kind of a plea. Will, get a toe amputated or something and come back out. They need you out there on Saturday. But then I think there's, like you said, AB, there's a puncher's chance.
Yeah, starting fast is going to be huge, and I think really outside of the Northwestern game, and you could even include it, the most dominant Michigan's been in terms of having control of the game, having momentum, was the beginning of the game against USC. I thought, and I'm talking about games against Big Ten opponents, and a lot of that had to do with field position, and then same thing went for the second half against Indiana, where they're getting quick stops, not just a stop, but quick stops. Like the formula usually to beat Ohio State is to hold them to field goals and all that. But I think with how this offense has not performed all that well this year, you're going to need to get quicker stops a lot of the time. Hope that you can get something maybe in the return game, or at least just a fair catch or something like that closer to midfield. Give your offense a little bit of help in that regard, and see if you can get into Dominic Zavada range. And then, everything else, certainly, you need to score some touchdowns too, but, get some points up there early, make sure you're not trailing the whole way. And kind of just drag this game out. But, we'll get more into it later in the week, but it's just going to be massive for Michigan to be able to lean on its defense. They're going to have to carry the team, I think, for a good portion of this game. And then if you get a couple breaks or a blown coverage, when you do get a blown coverage, don't miss and just not throw it to Peyton O'Leary and things like that. And I thought there was one too where Donovan Edwards was wide open in the last game as well, and he didn't hit him. So you're going to have to maximize every opportunity. But and it's going to take a hell of a performance, but it's possible.
Just a thought, given that today is Monday, November 25th, the 1-year anniversary of Rod Moore calling game and what was maybe the most cinematic Michigan-Ohio State game that we've ever seen. And just a point I want to make on that, just in terms of, because we know how it goes. If you go on Twitter, you've got Buckeyes in your mentions, you hear them spouting off about this and that, about every which way the last few years, how things went for them. They never talk about last year's game, though. They don't talk about it. They'll point to any number of things. They'll make excuses about Connor Stallions. They say you cheated. They'll say it was cold. They'll say that Ryan Day had a hangnail and couldn't get a play off the sheet because he was, working on his finger or something. They don't talk about last year's game because they settled it on the field. It was completely undisputed. There's nothing really to debate or make excuses for. And I find that fascinating because I think that was a well-played game by both teams. And it was heartbreaking. It was devastating for them. And I'm going to be really curious to see what the demeanor is of not just that coaching staff, but the players, because they, just like Michigan does, they ramp themselves up all year for this game. But I just, like I said, I've been saying it for 3 years, you get them into a 4-quarter game, you feel pretty good about your chances just because they tend to pucker.
Please, football gods, let us have that opportunity to see Ryan Day's face in the fourth quarter again of panic and just total distress because he doesn't know what to do and his guys aren't responding. So that would be amazing. You know what? Anything can happen in this game. We've seen bad Michigan teams almost beat good Ohio State teams under Brady Hoke. Brady Hoke teams played Ohio State pretty hard, right? Pretty well. And I think this team's got enough DNA and enough guys out there that take this personally. I love the fact that Mason Graham's continuing to play at an All-American level. That guy is the best defensive tackle that has ever played at Michigan. It is not debatable, guys. It is not debatable. He is the best Michigan defensive tackle there's ever been. So he's going to be down there, Kenneth Grant. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to go down there with you guys. We had a great time last time. It's just a fun trip. And to be in this position, knowing that there are better days ahead, win or lose, knowing that you've got the last 3 in, you don't want to lose, but if you do, it's still 3 out of 4, and you got better days to come. You've got recruiting's picked up. it's still a great day to be a Wolverine.
Anthony, it's like Brian Hartline would say, it's been 365 days since Rod Moore had his interception on that godforsaken day up in Ann Arbor, that team up north. And now it's been, how many days since Ohio State's beaten Michigan? So,
I mean, in a tab saved, it's been 1,822 days.
Wow, that's a lot of days.
That was a long time ago. That was pre-pandemic. The world has changed.
As the Buckeyes would say, that's about 10 years. So,
half of that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So yeah, but there's just great opportunity with this game, and there always is. We talked about this a few weeks ago when it was like, okay, Michigan's goals are kind of out the window in terms of national championship, Big Ten championship, and this is unacceptable at Michigan to lose at Illinois and really to not win a road game all year to this point. I thought all three of those were disappointing, but yes, while the expectation is much higher than that at Michigan, you still have something to play for on the final weekend, and the same goes for Ohio State, right? When they're down as well throughout history, and that's what makes this exciting. It's what they could put an exclamation point on the season, the regular season, and it's still the biggest game of the year. That's at the end, even though you've disappointed to this point. So in that regard, you have a big opportunity ahead of you.
1,000% excited to talk about that game in a little more depth later this week. I believe we'll record on Wednesday, get you in a little earlier show so you can listen to it on your way to grandma's house for Thanksgiving or wherever you're headed with your families. Certainly we'll kind of carve out some space for our time with our families as well. To close out this show, we will take questions from the Fort, our premium message board, which again, you can join, be a part of that for $1 for your first 7 days with us, and then $4.99 a month after that with an annual subscription as a first timer. Alrighty, let's take this one first from JJB Wolverine 80, who says, we've heard a lot about incoming players via recruiting and the transfer portal. Who are some guys on the 2024 roster we need to put a premium on being back in 2025?
We've talked about a lot of them, right? Derek Moore, Rod Moore. Are we talking about young guys, old guys, both? Dominic Zvada. You better find some cash for that guy with his golden foot, man. So Tommy Doman hopefully will continue to kick well. He'll be back, and he needs to have a much better year. He's got to have a really good offseason, guys, if he's going to come back. Otherwise, you're going to have to go out and get a punter. So, and then Mason Curtis is a guy who comes to mind, and guys like him, Jordan Marshall. So I'm not sure what to make of Ben Hall yet. I'll be honest, right? I think Jordan Marshall is the future of this team. You don't want anybody to leave, if they've got some potential. But to me, Jordan Marshall's got that a little bit more wiggle and looks to me like the back of the future. So those are some that come to mind. Hogan Hansen. There are several, right? But they're going to have to make room for a lot of guys too. That's just the way it is. There are going to be a lot of guys who leave, double digits at least, probably 20 or more, and that's just a sign of the times. So, but you got to keep the guys happy that are here, especially if you're spending a lot of money on recruits.
Yeah, I mean, we may write a bunch of articles that guys leave through the transfer portal, but a lot of the seniors, 20 of them that were honored on Saturday before the game have eligibility left, and a lot of them, may use that elsewhere. Some guys like, I won't even name them, I guess, but guys that have played on special teams, most of their career and things like that, because you have to shed some of your roster here with the 105 limit coming as well. So, you're going to lose some of those guys. You're certainly going to lose some other transfers as well, just because that's the nature of college football right now. The good thing is a lot of your best players probably going to the NFL. The guys you're paying the most, I think you're going to have a decent amount of money to retain the other ones that maybe more on the fence. We named a lot of them earlier in the show. But I think that you have those guys, maybe it's 24 on this team that you really need to keep, and then you need to pay almost like they're a recruit, because anybody in this era is going to get a wandering eye, or almost anybody. And then you got to go out and get a bunch of talent as well. So losing a lot does not mean you can't gain a lot too. And then the culture piece that we talked about earlier in the show is going to be massive, but that's, for every program in the country, they're going to have to balance that.
Certainly going to be some a lot of portaling in and out, I suspect. And also, I believe rosters expand to 105 next year. Is that number set yet?
I think it
Roster
is.
shrink to 105. And
Right.
yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
much set. Yeah.
But it's 105 scholarships, though.
Yes.
Yep.
Gotcha. Just wanted clarity on that. Let's go to this one from West Coast Wolverine. He says, is Davis Warren so worried he's going to throw an interception that it cripples him from throwing anything past 15 yards? Check down, and some more check down. He says, either we have a QB too scared to take chances or an OC who is equally awful at calling plays. Which do you think it is?
That's a loaded question, right? Because you're well, obviously Kirk Campbell's awful, or whatever. Kirk Campbell had a good game on Saturday. Number one, number two, the receivers haven't been good enough at times. The offensive line hasn't given them enough time at times. I think there's another possibility here too, is that Davis Warren isn't confident he's going to have the time to look downfield to throw. So you kind of have to tighten things up. When you get pressured on 61.8% of your passes, dropbacks against Indiana, that's indicative of something much more than the quarterback. So we can talk all we want to about Davis Warren not wanting to throw the deep ball. I haven't seen a whole lot of instances where guys are open, a couple that he's missed, obviously, but it's few and far between where the routes are shorter. Sometimes a lot of those plays, for example, the delay screen right to the tight end coming out, are design plays. The short passes to Donovan Edwards and the 2-minute drill, that was by design. So I think there's a lot involved there. So, but and part of it, sure, he doesn't want to throw into traffic and throw a pick, but it's got to be there. And a lot of the times, it just hasn't been this year.
Yeah, it's the entire operation, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think he's particularly accurate, too far down the field, and doesn't have a huge arm. Plus, he doesn't have a great receiving core, and he hasn't had time to throw. It's literally every part of what those plays are coming together. He was 1 of 5 on passes beyond only 10 yards of the line of scrimmage in this last game. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of dink and dunk. 25 completions. Within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, 8 of them behind the line of scrimmage. And some of those were those first down plays we talked about where they just got it out quickly into space. Some of those where, you missed a guy down the field or nobody got open down the field. So it's all part of it. It's something they need to do better. They're the only team in the country without a 40-plus yard pass this year, which is insane to think about. Think of the teams that hardly even throw in college football. So they need to address it with better everything next year, and just kind of make the most of what they can this season, the rest of the way in the next 2 games, really, that they have left.
Let's go to one from Mish0885, who says, what would you consider a successful 2025 season?
That's hard without knowing the roster, right? But this is Michigan. I would say you're right there, at least in contention for a playoff when you play Ohio State next year, right? And I know that you're going to have a freshman quarterback. They're going to get a quarterback from the portal, and there are no excuses now. You're building a roster. So to me, in year 2 with young guys, young skill position players, you can have a 9-3 season easily, and be right there on the cusp of the playoff. It's amazing how many people said there's no chance a 3-loss team gets into the playoffs, and I think that's a possibility this year. I really do, and I said that from the get-go, and I think it's going to be a possibility going forward because, again, there's that parity in college football. So to me, it's having an opportunity to make the playoff at the end of the year when you play Ohio State, and damn it, they're gonna continue to beat Ohio State too going forward. That's going to be a great series. Can't wait.
For usually I would say it's winning the Big Ten championship. That's a successful season at Michigan. I don't put as much importance on that anymore because it's gone to 18 teams. It's just harder to do. And if you make the playoff, you have as good of a chance as anybody, other than the first round bye. It just kind of helps you in the playoff, but you're still in the dance. So I'd say it's making the college football playoff. So as much as the expectations don't change at Michigan in terms of what is success and what's not, you kind of do have to recalibrate a little bit for what the expanded Big Ten is. So I'll say it's making the college football playoff. But, as Jim Harbaugh said in 1986, if we win this game, it's a successful season. If we don't, it's not a successful season. It comes down to beating Ohio State competing for the Big Ten championship, making the playoff, kind of similar now with the way college football's evolved.
And 2 years from now, it is to win the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, and go to the playoff. Period. End of story.
I've always just felt that Michigan's a school where you should win 9 to 10 games and before compete for a Big Ten title. Now it's compete for college football playoff. Big Ten title, of course, unlocks that and a whole lot more for you. That would be my expectation for just about every Michigan team, outside of some special circumstances. So that's where I'm at with it. We'll take 2 more here. This one from Scoot, who says, is Biff Poggi a possibility for the revamped coaching staff, and in what role?
I think he'll be in the role that he was with Jim Harbaugh, and I think that would be a great role for him, and a coup for Sharon Moore to have that guy there with him. There were a lot of people in that building that said Biff Poggi was a huge part of keeping things together and keeping Jim Harbaugh grounded at times, and I believe that. So bring him back in that capacity. It was fun. That was my first question of Sharon Moore today. Is there a possibility that he's coming back? And I think he said, what did he say? We're working on it or something like that.
He said we'll have to work those things out internally or something like that.
Yeah, but it certainly sounds like there's a possibility. He certainly didn't say no, right?
No, I think it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be huge. The trio of Sharon Moore, Sean McGee, and Biff Poggi, kind of the front office of Michigan, also Sharon, the head coach. And then you have, whatever the assistant coaching staff looks like. I think that's a really good start. Biff is awesome. And it's evidenced by the video last week of after he gets fired, he shows up to the next practice at Charlotte, and all the players just come sprinting over, and they just kind of share a really cool moment. He's done a ton for them. I mean, he taught financial literacy class for his own players because he used to run a hedge fund. He's got how many $1 million? Just what a selfless guy that is, like, just pretty much in this for the love of the game and in the love of the players. I think it'd be an awesome guy to have around again. Although when he left, they won the national championship. So some would say, that was the
some idiots might say, I want to use some of that money to get Ben Herbert back here too. I think if they brought Ben Herbert back and somehow, and I don't think it's going to happen, obviously, but that would be absolutely huge for the program too. With all due respect to the guys who are there now, it's just Ben Herbert was special.
That's as good of a head coach as Jim Harbaugh was. I think a big part of what happened the last 3 years prior to this one was having, all these kind of lieutenants that he said he's going to be like Moses, right? Lean on his staff. I don't know, there's a whole lot of guys, and this is no disrespect to anyone in that building, but I don't think there are guys of that sort of cachet or a ton of them in an abundance of them that are there right now. So would love to see it. Biff is a big part of what they did during that run. We'll close out with Hoops coach N3D says, assuming that there are changes to the coaching staff, what would that timeline look like? Would it be prior to the bowl game?
That's a good question. We don't know that. And I think it's kind of impossible to know that because some guys might still be coaching, right? I think there are some out there that, I don't think they're going to change things up. And I think this current staff will coach through the bowl game. That doesn't mean that you can't have things lined up before that. And there are some guys that aren't coaching right now that I think are in line for positions at Michigan that they're probably already talking to. So, but I would expect this staff to coach the bowl game and then for it to be announced after the year.
I understand.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you make a move or two before the bowl game. It probably depends on what position those are at because you need someone to fill in the meantime, or maybe you do have someone come in and actually coach the bowl game, someone that wasn't here. I mean, we saw Nebraska bring in Dana Holgorsen, who has become their offensive coordinator mid-season, which I don't know that I've ever seen before. So it's possible. I wouldn't imagine every change they make is after the bowl game. I would imagine some of them are made before. But I don't think that if you're around for the bowl game, it means you're necessarily around for next year. I think there's a lot of moving pieces. You have to figure out who's available as well. And a lot of the coaches you might want might be in the playoff. You'd hope some of them would be. So they may not be available till closer to the end of the month.
I have nothing to add, fellas. I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you, everyone, for watching this week. Like I said, we'll be back with our Ohio State preview on Wednesday. Chris, Clayton, and myself will be on that. And then us plus John Borton, I believe, hopping in the Wolverine chopper is our friend Bill Simonson likes to say, heading down to Columbus later this week. As I said before, like this channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel, use that, use the opportunity to join our site for $1 for your first 7 days, and then $4.99 for a month for your first year with us for first-time subscriber. For Chris, Clayton, our producer Megan behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broom, and we'll talk to you again next time.